Okay, boys, welcome to LJG Sports. The Houston Texans have signed former first round pick, a polarizing figure. After the Jimmy Ward arrest, the Houston Texans have signed, like I said, a former first round pick who had a great potential and has not been in the league since 2021 or 2022, I believe. So, very interesting. I'll go over this briefly. Jimmy Ward was arrested for domestic violence charges, I believe, and that could be wrong, so please do your own research into that. But again, I say innocent until proven guilty. We'll see what happens with that. We hope at the end of the day that everything turns out for the best, no matter what that is. But with the uncertainty, let's just say, of Jimmy Ward's situation, the Texans have gone on and signed a one-year deal for Damon Arnett, who is 28 years old now, former Las Vegas Raider, who's expected to replace veteran cornerback Ronald Darby, who retired earlier this month, and then, like I said, the whole Jimmy Ward situation, whatever happens with that. So what I take from this is a couple of things. First, Arnett has had his share of legal issues. Like I said, he hasn't played in the NFL since 2021. He played most recently for the UFL's Roughnecks from Houston, and he played pretty well. And I think that's why he got back on the radar of NFL teams. But he's had a history, again, of controversy, of off-field issues. But the Texans are hopefully thinking that he's over that stuff, because he is a solid player. That's the way I see it. And the Texans have shown, especially from the Nick Caserio, ever since the Texans have signed Nick Caserio and onward, ever since then, we've not been afraid to go out and sign people who are definitely controversial or have had off-field issues. Look back to Stephon Diggs last offseason, where his whole off-field issues with the Bills, and how his whole name being like this typical wide receiver diva who is getting mad when he doesn't get the ball. The Texans showed that they're not worried about that, and that we'll bring him in, we'll see what happens. If he ends up being a negative influence or whatever, we can, we only had him for 1 year. That's why I feel like when they traded for him, they restructured the contract to where it was only a 1-year deal. Because I think the Texans wanted it out unless it didn't work out. Whether it's off-field issues or just his age and injury history, which turned out to be, looks like the right move. And Stephon Diggs played well with the Texans before he got injured. And he seemed to have a positive impact on the Texans team. He was having fun playing football again, and just with that different environment, the Texans seemed like they were okay, and they didn't cause any locker room issues inside the building. And then recently, before the playoffs, if y'all remember when Tank Dell went down in the Chiefs game, we needed a wide receiver, and we signed Deontay Johnson. And Deontay Johnson, who had been on the Ravens, Steelers, Panthers, he was a big walking red flag. But the Texans were desperate. They needed a wide receiver. They said, you know what? We're not going to judge a book by its cover. We're going to bring him in, see what he's about. And going into it, it seemed like a lot of Texans fans and teammates and the coaches were hopeful that the new environment would help Deontay Johnson, because he is really talented. But the same thing happened where in the first playoff game, he was not getting many touches. He was not even on the field that much. And he was throwing a fit on the sideline. When your team is in a wild card game, win or go home, he wasn't getting touches, so he was throwing a fit. And so they released him shortly after that. And that's where I trust the Texans in this situation, because I've seen a lot of people on both ends of it where they say, well, Arnett has had history, so why take a chance on him? Well, because again, Ronald Darby retired, and like I said, Jimmy Ward and his uncertain situation, you want to get a DB in there who can, if he has to, replace, but also as just a viable backup option. And especially with a former first rounder like Arnett, who can have a high upside. If, heaven forbid, one of our guys goes down, like Stingley or Lassiter or Petrie or whoever. So it makes sense to me. Like I said, Arnett seems like a solid player, and he didn't seem to have any off-the-field issues with the Houston Roughnecks. So we'll see if he's changed. And again, the Texans, I feel like I trust them in this situation because with Deontay Johnson, where it wasn't turning out right, they just released him. They said, we're not going to deal with that. The Texans have shown that they're not afraid to give people a chance who have controversial history, but they are also unwilling to let a player like that on their team for too long. And they got rid of him. So I trust the Texans. I trust Nick Caserio. I trust DeMeco Ryans. I trust them to make the right decision here. And if he becomes an issue, get rid of him. They only signed him to a one-year deal. It's pretty easy to get rid of someone on a one-year deal. And if it turns out to be okay and he's a great, decent backup and his off-field issues are behind him, then great pickup. We got a really solid player backing up our great secondary. So that's what I think about it. I'm not too aware of the specifics of Arnett's off-field issues in the past. I do know to some extent, but again, I don't know specifics, so I'm not going to speculate on that. But there's definitely controversy around him, and again, my take on it is that the Texans, I feel like they know what they're doing. They've shown twice that they can handle these situations, whether it's bringing in Stephon Diggs and seemingly almost changing him, and like he was definitely happy with the Texans, or with the situation like Deontay Johnson where it definitely did not work out and they got rid of him ASAP because you cannot have that. So I trust that Texans culture. I trust, like I said, Nick Caserio, Cal McNair, DeMeco Ryans to make the right decision. And I think it's a great pickup for this already stacked secondary and stacked defense that the Houston Texans have. So let me know down below what you think about this whole situation. Jimmy Ward, Damon Arnett. Do you think he'll end up changing his ways and sticking with the team all year long? Do you think he'll be a good backup? Let me know down below what you agree with, disagree with. Let me know down below in the comment section below.